Usually each week there's a theme to the video. That's not the case this time. This time it's just three people caught up in a moment that they never asked for and they won't ever forget. I was only 8 years old and I lived in haunted houses my entire childhood. None of them traumatized me like this one did. My family and I lived in a fairly big house just outside of Temecula, California. That house had a dark, evil energy. I dreaded coming home every day from elementary school, and I especially dreaded nighttime. That's when things got worse. We were a small nuclear family. It was just me, my mother, my little brother Xander, and my Marine father, who was usually gone on deployment. Whatever was in this house loved when my father left. The activity became 10 times worse, and it loved to toy with me and my little brother. When we first moved in, it wasn't that bad. Toys going off on their own, unexplained noises in the attic, things that could still be brushed off. Until one night. My little brother was still a baby. I don't remember the exact age, but still crib-bound. One night, my mom woke up to strange noises coming from the baby monitor. She described it as loud static, and then a man's deep, disembodied voice began speaking through the monitor. My mom immediately jumped out of bed and rushed to my brother's room. She burst through the door and saw a shadowy figure standing in front of his crib, staring down at him. As quickly as she entered, the shadow flew backwards into the open closet at lightning speed. Slamming the door shut, a hanger fell from the closet and hit the floor. I can't imagine the fear my mom felt after seeing that. She moved Xander's crib into her room that night. This happened just after my dad left for Afghanistan, so the activity only intensified, and it didn't only focus on my baby brother, but whatever it was, it seemed especially fascinated with him. Not long after, we got a 3-month-old yellow Labrador named Berkeley. My mom knew that none of us felt safe inside the house, so maybe having a protector would help. Berkeley was the most gentle dog, always kind to kids and animals, even when my baby brother pulled his tail. So when I look back on the day we brought him home, when he bared his teeth, snarling and barking at an empty corner in the playroom, I had never seen him behave like that, not once in his 15 years of life, not even as a happy puppy. My 8-year-old self knew that there was something dark in that house, something Berkeley could see, and so could my brother. That brings me to Thanksgiving. Our extended family came over, and we all sat at the long dining table, chatting and laughing, completely oblivious to what was happening around us. Then, my baby brother ran out of the playroom, pale and crying. My mom picked him up, sat him on her lap, and everyone asked what was wrong. He could barely speak. He only pointed, his small, shaking finger slowly moving across the dining room as if it was tracking someone walking across the room. The rest of the family laughed it off, trying to comfort him, but I knew, and I knew my mom knew too. He was seeing something we couldn't. Not long after, something else happened. I was upstairs when my brother let out a blood-curdling scream. He ran from the playroom straight into my mom's arms. I rushed downstairs. Even after everything, I had never seen him that terrified. My mom tried to calm him down and ask what happened. He said the man grabbed his arms and tried to pull him into the toy box. We believed him completely. Xander refused to go near the toy box again, so we emptied it and laid all the toys on the floor. A few minutes later, I was sitting in the dining room playing Build-A-Bear on the family computer, trying to distract myself from whatever just happened. And then my mom whispered my name. Lexi, Lexi. Fear filled her voice. I looked up and saw the paper Christmas chain that I had made at school, the one that normally hangs beside the TV, being lifted from the bottom. It wasn't a draft. Something was holding it, moving it in an unnatural way. Then it yanked the chain hard, ripping it off the wall and dropped to the floor. Not that there was before, but there's no denying it anymore. Something was in that house. Every night, my mom, my brother, Berkeley, and I slept in her room with the door locked. Nighttime was when the heavy footsteps followed you upstairs. Pots and pans clanged, toys activated on their own, sometimes saying things that they shouldn't. And the attic? The attic sounded like something was stomping around at 3 in the morning, like a party was happening up there. We'd wake up to the pots and pans scattered across the kitchen floor. Whatever this was, it fed on chaos and fear. My mom told me something in that house that stuck with me forever. Don't show it fear, it feeds off of it. One day, I felt brave. I went into my room alone, locked the door, and climbed into my bunk bed and surrounded myself in stuffed animals. The moment I settled in, a high-pitched voice came from beneath the bed. Hi. It didn't sound like a child. It sounded like an adult pretending to be one. I froze. My heart was in my throat. I wanted to scream, but I remembered my mom's words. Slowly shaking, I climbed down. What did you just say? Nothing answered. Then I ran. From then on, I was always on edge. Sometimes I was too scared to sleep. One night, my mom accidentally fell asleep on the couch. Suddenly, every toy went off all at once. She tried to ignore it. Then she heard bare feet sprint across the tile. Then boom! Something slammed into the sliding glass door. The blinds were bent inward. She called the police. Not that it would matter. They searched the entire house. Surprise. No intruders. Then, a priest came. That didn't help either. Candles dancing, positive energy, nothing worked. All we could do was wait. So, we waited. 8 months later, my dad finally came home. The activity slowed down, but it didn't stop. Even he admitted that something wasn't right. We lived there for 2 years. 2 long years of non-stop fear. When we finally left, my mom heard what sounded like a mother scolding her child in the hallway. We believed there were multiple entities. They didn't follow us, but that didn't mean that the haunting was over. Far from it. But that's another house and another story. This happened, let's just say, a while ago. My high school girlfriend, we'll call her Emma, called me late one night after I was already home and in bed. She said something had happened and asked if I could come over. She was clearly shaken and couldn't give me any details. I told my parents what was going on, which wasn't much because I didn't know anything. I quickly left for her house. At the top of her subdivision, I was stopped by a police officer sitting with his lights on. He asked where I was going, and I explained that I had just received a call from my girlfriend. After a moment, he let me pass. As I came over the hill to the cul-de-sac where Emma lived, I saw multiple police cars positioned around the circle. Officers watched as I pulled up and stepped out of my car. Emma came running out of the house and met me in the street. She explained that someone had broken into her neighbor's house and started beating her with something heavy. Somehow, the neighbor managed to escape and ran to Emma's house, where she began banging furiously on the front door. Emma's dad was out of town, so her mom answered. The neighbor collapsed in the foyer, bleeding profusely from her head. As Emma's mom looked up, she saw the attacker coming up the walkway towards the front door. She dragged the neighbor fully inside and slammed the door shut, hitting the attacker with it just before the door could close completely. The attacker then lifted the same heavy tool he had used to beat the neighbor and smashed the small window at the top of the door. Emma's mom called 911 and began screaming. After breaking the glass, the attacker simply turned around and walked up the street, disappearing into the darkness. An ambulance arrived and took the neighbor away while the police secured the area. I spent the night there with Emma, along with 2 or 3 police cars still parked outside, just in case he decided to come back. The next morning, there was still blood pooled on the foyer floor, as well as splattered above the front door where the attacker had swung the bloody tool to break the window. It's wild to think that no one was ever caught or even identified. This was completely random, and the person got away scot-free. Who knows when or if they'll attack again. But as for the neighbor, she survived, and to my knowledge suffered no permanent physical injuries, beyond the scarring from having her scalp stapled shut. She moved away shortly after getting out of the hospital. When I was still in school, I would normally take the bus until I got my license. The bus stop was just a few blocks from my house, and there were 2 paths that you could take to get there. The first was along the road. Walk, take a right, walk some more, and then you'd be there. It took about 15 minutes. The second path was a straight shot through a patch of very thick forest, cutting the walk down by at least 10 minutes. One day, I was running late, and I decided to take the forest path. It was the start of winter, pitch black outside, and I had to wake up early for high school. I was either a freshman or a sophomore at the time, I can't really remember. I kept my eyes pointed forward as I walked, resisting the urge to look over my shoulder at every little snap and crack. But just as I spotted the bus stop through the trees, I heard a very loud snap, like a tree right behind me had been ripped apart. It was so loud that it echoed across the surrounding fields. Utterly terrified, I stormed forward. Thankfully, another kid was already at the bus stop. I think his name was John or Jay. We were in the same grade, but we weren't friends. I debated on mentioning the snap, but I didn't want to sound crazy on the off chance that he hadn't heard it. Luckily, he spoke first. "Dude, what the hell was that? Did you hear that?" It was still pitch black and we could barely see each other standing a couple feet apart. I didn't know him very well since he was new to the school, and I didn't want to draw attention to something that might be supernatural. I simply nodded, and he nodded back, understanding my hesitation. I stood a little closer to him than I normally would. I'm incredibly awkward, usually keeping my distance from others, but this was an exception. I needed a sense of comfort after what had just happened. We both went on our phones, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, not from behind, but from the front. I glanced up, keeping my head down, and just saw a figure dash into view about 13 feet away. At first, it looked like a deer, which were common in the area, so I ignored it, until unease forced me to look again. It stood up, like stood the fuck up. I looked over at John, Jim, whoever it was, hoping that he had seen it too, but he was glued to his phone. I turned back, and whatever it was looked directly at me. It was still dark, so I couldn't make out any facial features, just a shadow. Then it dropped back down onto all fours and ran so fast it was a blur, disappearing into the field behind it. Not even a minute later, the bus pulled up. I got on the bus first, and the other kid sat behind me, but before sitting down, he said in the most serious tone I've ever heard from him, "That was crazy." I knew then and there that he had at least had a glimpse of whatever that thing was. Does anyone know what this could have been? It still haunts me to this day.